been a decade since the last Marvel Vs. Capcom game was released, but the ultimate crossover franchise has finally made its way back onto the console. Where else could I possibly be able to have Ryu from Street Fighter pummel a hadouken into Iron Man? It's a game that is essentially for the hardcore fighters, but also catered well enough for any casual fighter to enjoy. First things first, I was a big fan of the 2D sprites of Marvel Vs. Capcom 2, and was somewhat disappointed to hear the sequel to one of the most popular fighters of all time would be making its transition to 2.5D. I'd always imagined if there was ever a sequel, we'd have some spectacular hand-drawn HD sprites. Yet, once you see Marvel vs. Capcom 3 in motion, it's beautiful. The developers truly stuck to something that comes straight out of a watercolor comic book. The animation for each particular character are unique and fit their style, and the stages are varied and filled with so much detail. You'll come across so many nostalgic areas such as the dark rooms of the Tri-Cell Laboratories to the platforming hell of Ghouls and Ghosts. As for the sound department, if you enjoyed the hokey jazz from Marvel vs. Capcom 2, you're in for a disappointment. The music is much more fitting with each of their characters having their respective themes and stages. You also have an option of choosing whether to keep a character's voice in English or their original Japanese language. The announcer, though, is annoying. No, I do not want to take you for a ride every time I load up the character select screen. I'm not really interested. Thankfully, I can turn it off in the options. Under offline mode, you have the basic arcade mode versus training and mission mode. For starters, the best way to get yourself accustomed to the game is to head there. Similar to Street Fighter 4, this mode lets you pick a single character and takes you through the step-by-step tutorial on learning the character's specific movesets. That's not your cup of tea? The training mode is also a surefire way to learn the tricks. Yet, if you're like me, the first thing you'll most likely head to is the arcade mode. Bare-bones mode where you make your way through a tier of CPUs until you finally take on the Eater of Worlds himself, Galactus. There's really nothing wrong with the lack of modes at all. It's an arcade game at heart, and it sticks very well to it. And even then, the lack of modes are easily made up for with the characters themselves. The roster itself is very small compared to the robust list on Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 featured 56 characters, whereas there's only 38 in Marvel vs. Capcom 3. But the game really makes up for itself with individual personality. Dante, which has become my growing favorite, feels exactly how I'd expect him to be. Sarcastic, cocky, and filled with a perfect set of moves that complement his abilities.
Show me your strength. Hey, I freaking love Street Fighter.
Deadpool is your fun-loving anti-hero who clearly realizes that he's been dumped into a fighting game and will use his own health bar to knock enemies out to prove it. I could list each and every character and just go through how well Capcom and Marvel made sure they fully realized their personal properties. My biggest issue with the roster, though, is the lack of certain characters and the addition of some that seem redundant. Arthur from Ghouls and Ghosts and Wesker are perfect inclusions to the game, but why have characters like X-23 and She-Hulk in the game when we already have their respective counterparts? Sure, they do play differently, but it seems like they could have done more to bring back Gambit or even Venom into the roster. The biggest change for Marvel vs. Capcom 3 is the control scheme. Unlike Marvel vs. Capcom 2, the game does not have a specific button for hard kick, low kick, hard punch, or low punch. Instead, it's been simplified to the way the recent Tatsunoko vs. Capcom works, with 4 buttons that are designated to light, medium, heavy, and special attacks. Veterans of the previous game may shun the drastic changes, but it really doesn't take away from the skill factor at all, it only changes it. You can still combine various movesets to create combos and chain-up supers to end up with an over-the-top, ridiculous finisher, and with the right timing and set of combos, you'll come out like a pro. If you're a casual gamer and it still is too much for you, don't fret, there's an even simpler mode for you. Simple mode is literally a mode where each button is designated to a specific combo. At the same time, you end up limiting your character's moveset, so be prepared to have repetition when boredom unfolds. Oh, and don't worry guys, it's strictly off limits online. Speaking of online, there isn't much I can say about the online portion other than the fact that it has potential. When you start off, you'll immediately receive a license that tracks both your offline and online modes along with information about your fighting styles and favorite characters. This is pretty useful since it feels very personalized and allows you to get a better idea of what to expect against your opponent. At the time of the review, I was unable to really venture into player-specific matches or ranked matches, but lobbies were widely available. Here you can join a group of other players who take turns battling each other in different successions. It's definitely a cool idea, but why is there no spectator mode? What the hell am I supposed to do while I'm waiting for a long match to end? Just watch those two license cards keep duking it out? I think not. Come on, Capcom, add a proper spectator mode ASAP. Well, in conclusion, we waited so long for Marvel Vs Capcom 3 and it does not disappoint. It's much different from its older brothers, but it's definitely not a bad thing. It provides a great experience for both hardcore and casual gamers with a fantastic roster of characters that anyone will love. This is a definite buy for anyone who is a fan of the franchise and needs more crossover love. While it definitely won't replace Marvel vs. Capcom 2, it holds up on its own and we'll just have to wait and see how it kicks off in the tournament scene. GameBlurb's verdict? Seriously slick.